The chlorine smell hit her nose the moment she walked through the glass doors of the community center. For most people, it was just another public pool. But for Lucia, this place was everything. It was her second home, her training ground, and the place where all her biggest dreams lived. She had been coming here since she was 8 years old. Back then, her mom had signed her up for swimming lessons because they only cost $20 a month. Her family couldn't afford the fancy, private clubs across town where other kids trained. Those places charged hundreds of dollars just to join, plus monthly fees that were more than what her mom made in a week at the grocery store. But Lucia didn't care about fancy pools or expensive coaches. She fell in love with swimming the first time she jumped into the deep end. The way the water felt around her body, the peaceful quiet when she went underwater, and the rush of power when she pushed off the wall. It was like nothing else in the world mattered. Now, 15 years later, she was 23 and still training at the same pool. The paint was peeling on the walls. The starting blocks were old and rusty, and sometimes the heating didn't work properly in winter. But this was her pool, and she knew every inch of it. Today was different, though. Today was the day she had been working toward for the past 4 years. The regional qualifying meet was happening in just 6 hours, and if she swam fast enough, she would earn a spot at the national championships. It was the kind of opportunity that could change everything. Her coach, a retired swimmer named Patricia who volunteered her time for free, had been telling her for months that she was ready. Lucia's times in practice had been getting faster and faster. Last week, she had swum the 200-meter butterfly in a time that would have placed 5th at last year's nationals. That was fast enough to get noticed by the right people. The butterfly stroke was her specialty. It was the hardest stroke to master, requiring perfect timing and incredible strength. Most swimmers avoided it because it was so exhausting. But Lucia loved the challenge. She loved how it demanded everything from her body and mind at the same time. She arrived at the pool early that morning for her final practice session. The competition was being held at the State University Aquatic Center, about an hour away. It was a completely different world from her home pool. The university facility had 8 lanes instead of 6, electronic timing systems, and bleachers that could hold over 1,000 people. As she warmed up, Lucia tried not to think about all the swimmers she would be racing against. Many of them had been training at elite clubs since they were children. They had personal coaches, sports psychologists, and nutritionists. Some of them had already been to national-level competitions multiple times, but Lucia had something many of them didn't have: pure hunger. She wanted this more than anything she had ever wanted in her life. Swimming wasn't just a hobby or a way to get into college for her. It was her chance to prove that someone from her neighborhood could compete with anyone. Her family had sacrificed so much to support her swimming. Her mom worked double shifts at the store to pay for gas money to get to competitions. Her younger brother had given up asking for new clothes so they could afford her entry fees. Her dad picked up weekend construction jobs to help buy the few pieces of equipment she needed. The pressure of knowing how much everyone was counting on her sometimes kept her awake at night, but it also pushed her to train harder than anyone else at the pool. While other swimmers complained about difficult sets, Lucia asked for more. When practice was over, she often stayed for an extra 30 minutes to work on her technique. As the day went on, the butterflies in her stomach grew stronger. She tried to eat lunch but could barely finish half a sandwich. Her mom drove her to the university, and they spent the drive mostly in silence. Both of them knew how important this day was. When they arrived at the aquatic center, Lucia was amazed by how different everything looked and felt. The pool was crystal clear and perfectly heated. The lane ropes were new and brightly colored. The starting blocks had electronic sensors that would record her time down to the 100th of a second. The warm-up pool was already crowded with swimmers from across the region. Lucia recognized some faces from previous competitions, including several swimmers who had beaten her before. But she also noticed that her times had been getting closer to theirs in recent months. The gap was narrowing. She found a quiet corner to set up her bag and began her pre-race routine. First, she put on her lucky cap, a faded blue one that Patricia had given her 3 years ago. Then she did her stretching routine, the same movements she had done before every race since she was 15. Her family found seats in the bleachers. Her mom, dad, and brother were all there, along with her grandmother who had driven 2 hours just to watch. Patricia was on the pool deck, helping her with last-minute technical advice. As the day progressed, Lucia swam her preliminary heat and qualified for the finals. Her time was good, not her best ever, but fast enough to earn lane 4 in the championship race. Lane 4 meant she was seeded 4th out of 8 swimmers. It also meant she had a real chance of finishing in the top 3, which would automatically qualify her for nationals. The hours between preliminaries and finals felt like days. Lucia tried to rest, but her mind kept racing. She visualized the race over and over, imagining every stroke, every breath, every turn. She had swum this race thousands of times in practice and hundreds of times in her mind. When it was finally time for the 200-meter butterfly final, Lucia felt surprisingly calm. All the nervousness from earlier in the day had transformed into focused energy. She knew she was as ready as she would ever be. As she walked out onto the pool deck for the final time that day, she could hear her family cheering from the stands. The pool area was packed with coaches, swimmers, parents, and scouts from various college programs. Some of them had cameras and were recording the races. Lucia took her position behind lane 4 and began her final preparations. She shook out. Her arms and legs took several deep breaths and reminded herself of all the work she had put in to get to this moment. Every early morning practice, every afternoon when she was exhausted but kept swimming anyway, every sacrifice her family had made. It had all led to this. The race was about to begin, and Lucia had never felt more ready for anything in her life. She stepped up onto the starting block, looked down the length of the pool, and prepared to dive into the race that could change her future forever. The pool deck grew quiet as the swimmers took their marks. This was it. This was her moment. Everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed about, was about to happen in the next 2 minutes. She took one last deep breath and waited for the starting signal that would begin the most important race of her life. The starting signal echoed through the aquatic center, and Lucia launched herself into the water with everything she had. The first 50 meters felt perfect. Her stroke was smooth, her timing was exact, and she could feel herself keeping pace with the swimmers on either side of her. As she reached the first turn, she was exactly where she wanted to be, right in the middle of the pack, conserving energy for the final push. The butterfly stroke demanded perfect pacing. Go out too fast and you'd die in the last 50 meters. Go out too slow and you'd never catch up. The second 50 meters went by in a blur. Lucia found her rhythm and started to move up in the field. By the 100-meter mark, she was in 3rd place, just behind the 2 swimmers she had expected to lead the race. Her family was going crazy in the stands, but underwater, all she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. The third 50 was where the race would really begin. This was where the weaker swimmers would start to fade, and the strongest would pull away. Lucia had trained for this moment thousands of times. She knew her body could handle the pain that was starting to build in her shoulders and legs. As she approached the 150-meter turn, something amazing was happening. She was actually gaining on the leaders. The swimmer in lane 5, who had beaten her at every competition this season, was starting to struggle. Lucia could see her stroke getting shorter and less powerful. For the first time in her life, Lucia was actually in contention to win a major race. Not just place well, not just make the qualifying time. She had a real chance to touch the wall first. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through her body that made her stroke even stronger. She made the turn at 150 meters in 2nd place, just half a body length behind the leader. The crowd was on their feet. She could see her coach Patricia on the deck, gesturing wildly and shouting encouragement that she couldn't hear over the water. The final 50 meters of any 200-meter butterfly is brutal. It's where champions are made and dreams are crushed. Every muscle in your body is screaming, your lungs are burning, and your stroke wants to fall apart. But this is also where all those months of training pay off. Lucia had swum this final 50 meters in practice so many times that her body knew exactly what to do, even when her mind was overwhelmed by the moment. Stroke, breathe, stroke, breathe. Keep the rhythm. Don't let the stroke get short. fight, through the pain. With 30 meters to go, she was neck and neck with the leader. The swimmer in lane 3 was someone who had been to nationals twice before, but Lucia wasn't intimidated anymore. She was swimming the race of her life, and she could feel that something special was happening. 20 meters from the wall, Lucia took the lead for the first time. The crowd noise was so loud that even underwater she could feel the vibrations. Her grandmother was probably crying in the stands. Her little brother was probably jumping up and down. This was really happening. But in that moment of joy and excitement, something went terribly wrong. Lucia had been so focused on the race, so caught up in the incredible feeling of leading, that she lost track of exactly where she was in the pool. The combination of adrenaline, exhaustion, and pure excitement clouded her judgment for just one crucial second. As she approached what she thought was still 15 meters from the wall, she prepared for one more stroke before her final approach. But the wall was closer than she realized. Much closer. Instead of her hand entering the water for another stroke, her head crashed directly into the concrete wall with a sickening thud that seemed to echo throughout the entire aquatic center. The impact was so violent that it sent a shockwave through the water. Lucia's body went limp immediately, and she began to sink beneath the surface. For a terrifying moment, there was complete silence in the pool area as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The lifeguards reacted quickly, jumping into the water to pull her to the surface. Blood was already streaming from a deep gash on her forehead, turning the clear pool water around her a frightening shade of red. She was conscious but completely disoriented, floating on her back while the medical team rushed to the pool deck. The other swimmers had finished the race, but nobody was celebrating. Everyone was focused on the young woman who had gone from leading the race to fighting just to stay conscious in a matter of seconds. Her family rushed down from the bleachers, her mother's face white with terror. As the medical team worked to stop the bleeding and assess her injuries, something else was happening that would make this nightmare even worse. Several people in the crowd had been recording the race on their phones, expecting to capture an exciting finish. Instead, they had recorded one of the most brutal crashes in swimming history. Within minutes of the accident, those videos were being uploaded to social media. What started as a few people sharing what they had witnessed quickly snowballed into something much bigger and much more cruel than anyone could have imagined. The first comments on the videos were mostly concerned and sympathetic. People were hoping she was okay and praising her for the incredible race she had been swimming. But as the videos spread to people who didn't know the context, who hadn't seen her journey or understood what this race meant to her, the tone began to change. Someone added cartoon sound effects to the crash. Another person set it to comedy music. Within hours, what had been a devastating accident for a young athlete had become entertainment for strangers on the internet. The video was being shared with captions like "epic pool fail" and "when swimming goes wrong." By the time Lucia was released from the hospital 12 hours later with a severe concussion and 12 stitches in her forehead, her crash had been viewed over 1 million times. She had become an internet meme and she didn't even know it yet. The concussion was severe enough that doctors told her she couldn't return to training for at least 3 months. The injury had also damaged her confidence in a way that was even harder to heal than the physical wounds. She kept replaying those final moments of the race over and over, wondering how she had misjudged the wall so badly. Her phone, which had been buzzing constantly with notifications, became a source of dread. Rather than connection, friends were trying to check on her, but they were also sharing the videos and the memes that had spawned from her accident. Each notification felt like another reminder of the most embarrassing moment of her life. The swimming community in her area rallied around her at first. Her coach Patricia visited every day and her teammates sent flowers and cards. But as the viral video continued to spread, even the support began to feel tainted by pity. She could see it in people's eyes. They felt sorry for her, but they also couldn't stop thinking about the crash. What hurt the most was that the video completely erased the incredible race she had been swimming. Nobody talked about how she had been in first place. Nobody mentioned that she had been swimming a personal best time that would have easily qualified her for nationals. All anyone remembered was the crash, the blood in the water, and the sound her head had made hitting the wall. The medical bills from the emergency room visit and follow-up appointments began piling up on her family's kitchen table. Their insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. Her parents, who had already been struggling financially to support her swimming, now faced thousands of dollars in unexpected expenses. Lucia's dream of making it to nationals was officially over, but more than that, her love for the sport that had defined her entire life was beginning to die along with her public humiliation. 6 months had passed since the accident, but for Lucia, it felt like 6 years. The stitches had healed, leaving only a thin scar on her forehead that she covered with makeup every day. The concussion symptoms had mostly gone away too, but the damage to her spirit ran much deeper than any physical injury. She hadn't been back to the community pool since the day after the accident. That visit had been torture. Everyone stared at her with those pitying looks, whispering among themselves when they thought she couldn't hear. Even worse, a few people had actually recognized her from the viral video and made jokes about staying away from the walls. The smell of chlorine, which had once been like a warm hug from an old friend, now made her stomach turn. Just walking past the community center on her way to work brought back memories of that horrible night. The sound of splashing water, the echo of voices in the pool area, even the sight of someone carrying a swim bag. Everything reminded her of what she had lost. Her family tried their best to help her through it, but they were struggling too. The medical bills had eaten up their small savings account, and her dad had to take on even more weekend construction jobs to keep up with the payments. Her mom picked up extra shifts at the grocery store, coming home exhausted every night with sore feet and worried eyes. The worst part was watching her little brother Diego try to cheer her up. He was only 16, but he seemed to understand that his big sister was broken in a way that couldn't be fixed with bandages or medicine. He would bring her little gifts, a candy bar from the store, a funny video on his phone, or sometimes just sit with her in comfortable silence. Lucia had dropped out of community college after the accident. The plan had been to study part-time while training for swimming. But without swimming, she couldn't focus on anything else. Her professors had been understanding about her medical situation. But as weeks turned into months, it became clear that she wasn't coming back. Instead, she threw herself into work at Romano's Italian restaurant downtown. It wasn't a fancy place, just a family-owned spot with checkered tablecloths and pictures of Italy on the walls. But the owner, Mrs. Romano, had given her as many hours as she wanted without asking too many questions about why a young woman was suddenly available to work 6 days a week. The work was mind-numbing, which was exactly what Lucia needed. Take orders, serve food, clean tables, count tips. Simple tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind from wandering to dark places. The other servers were nice enough, mostly college students working part-time, but Lucia kept to herself. She didn't want to explain her story to anyone new. The hardest moments came when she least expected them. A customer would mention going to their kid's swim meet, or she'd hear a sports report on the restaurant's TV about an upcoming swimming competition. Sometimes a song would come on the radio that reminded her of the music they used to play during practice, and she'd have to excuse herself to the bathroom until the crying stopped. Her coach Patricia called at least twice a week for the first few months. She left voicemails talking about new training techniques she had learned, updates about other swimmers from the team, and gentle encouragements about making a comeback. But Lucia never called back. She couldn't bear to hear the hope in Patricia's voice when her own hope had died in that pool. The viral video had finally stopped being shared as much, but it never completely went away. Every few weeks, someone would discover it again and it would make the rounds on social media. Each time it resurfaced, Lucia felt like she was reliving that nightmare all over again. She had learned to stay off the internet as much as possible, but sometimes people would show her the video without warning, thinking it was funny. One particularly bad day happened about 4 months after the accident. Lucia was working the lunch shift when a group of college students came in. They were clearly athletes. She could tell by their build and the way they carried themselves. As she was taking their order, one of them was showing something on his phone to the others. "Oh my God, you have to see this swimming fail," he said, not noticing that Lucia was standing right there. This girl just crashes into the wall so hard. It's brutal, but hilarious. Lucia recognized her own accident playing on his phone screen. Her hand started shaking as she wrote down their drink orders. The students were laughing and rewinding the video, completely unaware that the person they were mocking was serving their lunch. She managed to get through taking their order without breaking down, but spent her break crying in the restaurant storage room. That was the day she realized that the video would probably follow her for the rest of her life. Somewhere out there, people would always know her as that girl who crashed into the wall. The isolation was the worst part. She had cut off contact with most of her swimming friends because being around them reminded her too much of what she had lost. Her high school friends had moved on with their lives. Some were at college, others had jobs or relationships that kept them busy. Lucia felt stuck in time while everyone else moved forward. Her family worried about her constantly, but they didn't know how to help. Her mom would suggest activities they could do together, but Lucia had no interest in anything. Her dad offered to teach her some basic construction skills so she could help with his weekend jobs, but physical work reminded her too much of training. The depression crept in slowly at first, then all at once. Some days she could barely get out of bed to go to work. She stopped caring about how she looked, wearing the same black work clothes day after day. She lost weight because she forgot to eat, and gained it back when stress eating became her only comfort. Mrs. Romano noticed the changes but was kind enough not to push too hard. She would sometimes pack extra food for Lucia to take home, claiming it was leftovers that would go bad otherwise. She also started scheduling Lucia for morning shifts instead of evening ones, somehow sensing that the busy lunch crowd was better for her than the quiet dinner hours when her mind had too much time to wander. One evening in late spring, while Lucia was wiping down tables after closing, she overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. A group of business people had been having dinner in the back corner, and she was cleaning the table next to theirs. They were talking about youth sports programs and mentorship opportunities for kids from low-income families. The problem is finding role models, one woman was saying. Kids need to see people who look like them, who come from similar backgrounds, who have faced real challenges and overcome them. Exactly, another person agreed. Success stories are powerful, but comeback stories are even better. Kids need to know that failure doesn't have to be the end of the story. The conversation hit Lucia like a punch to the chest. She thought about all the young swimmers at her old community center, kids who reminded her of herself at that age. Kids who were probably watching her video and learning that dreams could be destroyed in an instant. For the first time in months, Lucia felt something other than sadness and shame. She felt a tiny spark of something that might have been purpose, though she was too scared to call it hope just yet. It was a Thursday evening in March, and the rain was coming down so hard that it sounded like someone was throwing handfuls of pebbles at the restaurant windows. The weather had kept most people home, which meant Romano's was quieter than usual. Lucia actually preferred nights like this. Fewer customers meant less chance of running into someone who might recognize her. She was wiping down the last few tables when the bell above the front door chimed. A man walked in, shaking the rain off his jacket. He looked to be in his 60s with graying hair and kind eyes behind simple glasses. He was dressed casually, just jeans, a sweater, and sneakers that had seen better days. Nothing about him screamed wealth or importance. Terrible night to be out, Lucia said as she showed him to a table by the window. But you picked the right place to wait out the storm. The man smiled warmly. Actually, I was hoping for somewhere quiet to get some work done. Your restaurant came highly recommended. Lucia handed him a menu and noticed he had a laptop bag. With him, probably a professor or maybe someone who worked from home. She got customers like that sometimes, people who use the restaurant as their office for a few hours. Just coffee and a piece of whatever pie you recommend, he said without even looking at the menu. And don't worry about checking on me too often. I'll be here a while. His name was David, she learned when she brought his coffee. He was polite, but not chatty, which Lucia appreciated. She had gotten good at reading customers, the ones who wanted to talk, the ones who wanted to be left alone, and the ones who were just killing time. As the evening went on, Lucia found herself glancing over at his table while she cleaned. His laptop screen was facing away from her, but she could see he was watching videos of some kind. Every now and then, he would pause and take notes in a small notebook. When she brought him his second cup of coffee, she caught a glimpse of his screen, swimming videos. Her heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to stay calm. Lots of people watch sports videos online. It didn't mean anything. "Are you a swimming fan?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual as she refilled his cup. David looked up with interest. "In a way, yes. I'm trying to understand the technical aspects of different strokes. It's fascinating how much goes into what looks so simple." Something about his tone made Lucia feel safe to continue the conversation. Maybe it was because he seemed genuinely curious rather than just making small talk. "I used to swim," she said quietly. The words felt strange coming out of her mouth. She hadn't admitted that to anyone new in months. "Really? What was your specialty?" David asked, closing his laptop to give her his full attention. "Butterfly," Lucia answered before she could stop herself. "It's the hardest stroke, but also the most rewarding when you get it right." David's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "That's exactly what I was reading about. The coordination required is incredible. How long did you swim competitively?" For the next 20 minutes, Lucia found herself talking about swimming in a way she hadn't done since the accident. David asked thoughtful questions about training, technique, and what it felt like to race. He seemed particularly interested in the mental aspects of competition and the challenges that young athletes faced. "The thing about butterfly," Lucia explained, "is that it demands everything from you. Your technique has to be perfect, your timing has to be exact, and you have to be mentally strong enough to push through when your body wants to quit." "That sounds like it would build incredible character," David said. "The kind of resilience that would serve someone well beyond the pool." Lucia felt a warmth in her chest that she hadn't experienced in months. It felt good to talk about swimming as something beautiful again instead of just remembering the pain. "What made you stop?" David asked gently. The question hit her like cold water. For a moment, Lucia considered making up a story about college or work commitments, but something about David's genuine curiosity made her want to tell the truth. "I had an accident," she said simply. "A bad one that ended my season and, well, everything really." David nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the worst moments can become turning points, even when we can't see it at the time. Before Lucia could respond, another customer came in and she had to excuse herself. But throughout the rest of her shift, she kept thinking about what David had said. Turning points. She had never thought about her accident that way. When David was ready to leave, he approached the counter to pay his bill. As he handed her cash, he also gave her a simple white business card. "I enjoyed our conversation about swimming," he said. "If you ever want to talk more about the sport or about second chances, I'd be happy to listen." Lucia glanced at the card and felt her breath catch. The name on it was David Chen, and underneath was the logo of a company she recognized. Not because she followed business news, but because everyone in their city knew that name. Chen Technologies had started in a garage 20 years ago and was now worth billions of dollars. David Chen wasn't just some guy working on his laptop. In a restaurant, he was one of the wealthiest people in the state. "Thank you for the coffee and conversation," David said with the same kind smile he'd had all evening. Sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. After he left, Lucia stood behind the counter staring at the business card. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pulled out her phone and searched for David Chen online. The articles confirmed what she already suspected. He was incredibly successful, but more importantly, he had recently started a foundation focused on supporting young people who had faced significant obstacles. The more she read, the more confused she became. Why had someone like David Chen spent his evening in a small Italian restaurant asking her about swimming? It couldn't be a coincidence that he had been watching swimming videos and then struck up a conversation with her about the sport. As she walked to her car that night, Lucia's mind was racing. For months, she had felt invisible, like her story didn't matter to anyone. But something about her conversation with David had made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced since before the accident. She drove home through the rain, David's business card sitting on her passenger seat. Part of her wondered if she should just throw it away and pretend the evening had never happened. Getting her hopes up again felt dangerous after so many months of disappointment, but another part of her, a part that had been quiet for so long, she had almost forgotten it existed, was whispering that maybe this was exactly the kind of unexpected opportunity that people talked about. Maybe David Chen hadn't wandered into Romano's by accident. Maybe sometimes the universe really did work in mysterious ways. That night, for the first time since the accident, Lucia fell asleep thinking about swimming not as something that had been taken from her, but as something that might still be part of her future. She didn't know what David Chen wanted or why he had sought her out, but she was finally curious enough to find out. Lucia spent the next 3 days staring at David's business card. She had looked him up online so many times that she could probably recite his company's history from memory. The more she learned about him, the more confused she became about why he had been in that restaurant talking to her about swimming. David Chen wasn't just wealthy. He was the kind of person who appeared on magazine covers and gave speeches at universities. His company had revolutionized online education, and his foundation had already helped hundreds of students from disadvantaged backgrounds. What could someone like that possibly want with a failed swimmer who served pasta for a living? On Friday morning, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something told her to answer it anyway. "Hello, is this Lucia?" The voice was professional but warm. "This is Jennifer, calling from Mr. Chen's office. He asked me to reach out and see if you would be interested in meeting with him next week." Lucia's heart started pounding. "Meeting about what?" "He mentioned that you had an interesting conversation about swimming and second chances. He'd like to discuss some opportunities that might interest you." The word opportunities sent Lucia's mind spinning. She almost hung up the phone right then. After months of disappointment, the idea of getting her hopes up again terrified her. But something deeper, some tiny voice that sounded like her old self, made her say yes. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon at David's office downtown. Lucia had never been in a building that fancy before. The lobby had marble floors and a ceiling that seemed 3 stories high. She felt completely out of place in her best dress, which was really just something she wore to job interviews. When the elevator reached the 20th floor, Jennifer met her with the same warm smile she had heard over the phone. She led Lucia through a hallway lined with windows that offered an incredible view of the city. David's office was nothing like what Lucia had expected. Instead of an intimidating desk and formal chairs, it felt more like someone's living room. Comfortable. Couches, family photos, and bookshelves filled with everything from business manuals to poetry collections. "Lucia, I'm so glad you came," David said, standing up from his desk with the same genuine smile she remembered from the restaurant. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee, water, soda?" As they settled into the comfortable chairs by the window, David's demeanor was exactly the same as it had been at Romano's. Friendly, curious, and completely down to earth. It was hard to believe this was the same person she had read about in business magazines. "I have to ask," Lucia said, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "Why were you at that restaurant the other night? And why were you watching swimming videos?" David chuckled softly. "You're very direct, I like that." He leaned back in his chair. "The truth is, I was there specifically to meet you." Lucia felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "I saw your video," David said gently. "The one from your accident at the swimming competition." All the color drained from Lucia's face. This was it. Another person who wanted to talk about her most embarrassing moment. Maybe he was making some kind of documentary about viral fails. Or maybe he just wanted to meet the girl who had become a meme. But David's next words were completely unexpected. "What I saw in that video wasn't failure," he said, his voice serious but kind. "What I saw was an athlete who was swimming the race of her life. Someone who was so determined to win that she pushed herself beyond every limit." Lucia stared at him in shock. "But I crashed into the wall. I made the stupidest mistake possible. You were leading the race, David replied firmly. You were swimming faster than you had ever swum before. You were so focused on giving everything you had that you lost track of where you were. That's not stupidity, that's what champions do. For months, Lucia had only heard people talk about the crash. No one ever mentioned that she had been winning. No one remembered that she had been swimming a personal best time. All anyone saw was the mistake. I had a swimming coach analyze that video frame by frame, David continued. Your technique was flawless. Your speed was incredible. You were competing against swimmers who had every advantage, better facilities, private coaches, more resources, and you were beating them. Tears started forming in Lucia's eyes. After so many months of shame and embarrassment, hearing someone focus on her performance instead of her mistake felt overwhelming. That's when I knew I had to find you, David said. See, I've been working on something for the past year, a program to support athletes who have incredible potential but lack the resources to reach it. Athletes who have faced setbacks but still have the heart to fight back. David walked over to his desk and picked up a folder. What I'm about to offer you might sound too good to be true, but I want you to know that every word of it is real. He sat back down and opened the folder. I want to offer you full funding to return to competitive swimming. A world-class coach, access to Olympic-level training facilities, coverage of all your medical expenses, and a living allowance so you can focus entirely on training. Lucia's mouth fell open. Are you serious? Completely serious. But there's more. David's eyes were bright with excitement. I also want you to become the face of our new foundation. Your story, the whole story, including the accident, could inspire millions of young athletes who have faced their own setbacks. You want me to talk about the video? About the accident? I want you to own your story, David said. Right now, other people are telling it for you, and they're getting it wrong. They're making you a punchline when you should be a hero. David explained his vision. He wanted to create a documentary about Lucia's comeback journey. He wanted to show the world what he had seen in that video. Not a failure, but a fighter. He wanted young athletes everywhere to understand that one bad moment doesn't define their entire future. The program would also establish a scholarship fund for other athletes like you. David continued. Kids who have the talent and the heart, but not the resources. You would help us find them and mentor them. Lucia sat in stunned silence for several minutes. 6 months ago, she had been leading the biggest race of her life. 3 months ago, she couldn't even look at a swimming pool without having a panic attack. Now someone was offering her a chance not just to return to the sport she loved, but to help other kids achieve their dreams too. Why me? She finally asked. There are thousands of swimmers out there who are faster, who have better records, who haven't made viral videos of their worst moments. David smiled. Because those swimmers haven't been through what you've been through. They haven't lost everything and had to find the strength to keep going. They haven't experienced the kind of humiliation you've faced and survived it. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Champions aren't made in the moments when everything goes right. They're made in the moments when everything goes wrong and they choose to get back up anyway. That video doesn't show your worst moment. It shows your potential to become something extraordinary. For the first time in months, Lucia felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Real, genuine hope that her story wasn't over, that her dreams weren't dead, that maybe her biggest failure could become the foundation for her greatest success. When do we start? She asked. And David's smile told her that her life was about to change forever.